All right, hey there, I'm Dan Haggerty. I'll read a few things to you here. I take exception to your comments. The problem with the world today is people like you. Please read the Bible. I got some, let's call them impassioned emails after my last segment. If you have something to say, anything, I want to hear it, and I promise I am listening. Email me at dan@WRAL.com. Now here's a quick recap of the segment they were reacting to. Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson doesn't want a book called Gender Queer in our school libraries because it has sexual images that are honestly too graphic to even describe to you on TV, which is a very reasonable opinion to have. Yet, protesters are calling him a bigot who's trying to silence LGBTQ people and stifle free speech, which in a snapshot kind of seems like a pretty extreme stance. So I explained that the furious backlash was less about his opinion on that specific book and more about his overall disdain for gay and trans people.
There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth. And yes, I called it filth. And if you don't like it that I called it filth, come see me and I'll explain it to you.
Now, I'm sure you've seen that clip several times before. It's been used many times by people trying to attack Robinson or do headline journalism. So, of course, I was going to trigger some of his supporters with that, or maybe people who just don't like sensationalized news and are kind of tired of seeing it. So I got a few angry emails from people who perhaps misunderstood why or how I was using it, like Ronnie. Ronnie said, "I'll be switching to other channels. Thanks for confirming my assumptions and illustrating how biased you and WRAL really is. You fear my lieutenant governor. He's a strong Christian man with morals you lack." So Ronnie, I really hope you haven't switched channels, because I didn't use that clip to demonstrate my opinion on Robinson. I used it to explain why some people think his motives are more sinister than just removing a book, like the people protesting him, for instance, and why his explanation to that controversy could seem a bit flimsy.
Look, my spiritual beliefs about transgenderism and homosexuality is completely separate from this office, and I can keep it separate from this office. And that is not the issue that we're talking about here. Again, I'm going to state this to you again. My personal beliefs and spiritual beliefs about homosexuality are not pertinent.
I asked all of you if you found that explanation to be reasonable and explained how I was kind of struggling to understand this defense, because a person's faith and moral standing is at the core of who they are, right? And will always play some role in subjective decisions. But many of you think that my line of thinking was unreasonable and had some compelling reasons why, like Scott, who said, "I understand where you're coming from, but I also believe you are on a real slippery slope. In 1960, people made a similar argument against presidential candidate John F. Kennedy, arguing his Catholic beliefs disqualified him from the nation's highest office. Many called out his critics for what they considered to be religious bigotry. How is your argument tonight any different?" So first, I never said the lieutenant governor should be disqualified from anything. Who am I to say that? He's an elected leader. For the rest of it, I figured the best thing to do would be to bring in an expert. So I discussed the email with a political science professor at UNC who has an expertise in public opinion, trust in government, and polarization.
So the big concern about Kennedy in 1960 was that the Pope would be making decisions rather than Kennedy, right? The president would defer to, some power in Rome, in the Vatican. But, Kennedy's Catholicism itself, was very much on display.
Or, in other words, people were worried that the Pope would be like a shadow president pulling the strings in the White House from the Vatican. But Kennedy's Catholic values were always part of his run against Nixon, like his compassion for the poor, for instance. That said, he did deal with anti-Catholic discrimination throughout the election. So, Scott, thank you for the email. But again, for clarity, I never weighed in on the lieutenant governor's policy or his religious beliefs. I only questioned his assertion that they could be completely separate. As he said, too clear-cut, when science infers it's a gray area with countless studies on implicit or unconscious bias, saying that we subconsciously have preferences based on our life experiences. We deal with this as journalists all the time. Let's say I'm assigned to cover a story about a guy who got arrested. No problem, I can do that. But what if I knew the guy, an old friend from high school maybe? Well, now we're getting a little bit close, aren't we? Now imagine that the guy who was arrested was my dad. Do you think my boss would let me cover that one? I doubt it. And you'll notice that my potential for bias grew as the issue got more personal.
When it comes to, economic issues, it seems like those things are readily separable. We've often had some of the wealthiest people who have held office be real champions for those who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. But when it comes to moral issues, they tend to be somewhat different from economic issues. In the case of the lieutenant governor, the commitment, tends to be, in this case, religious in nature, very central to his being. Then, of course, it's going to seep into, the way any person, would, decide to, live out his commitments.
Remember, this segment that I do is a discussion. I want to hear your thoughts. These aren't editorials. People write me every night and they say, we like your editorial or we don't like your editorial. That's not what these are. These aren't opinion pieces. I'm not telling you what to think or what you should think. Donna wrote me and said, why doesn't WRAL tell the facts, not your opinion? Donna, I know that I take a little getting used to, but the news isn't always just a list of facts. Sometimes we need a place to discuss stories where simple who, what, when, where, why leaves you wanting more or needing more context or analysis, community feedback and input. I want this to be a place for that. Lastly, Jay asked, honest question, are you allowed to report on anything other than genderqueer? Yes, I am. They're allowing me. I am allowing myself. There was a lot to get in there. How about daylight saving time? Can we talk about that? The crankiness we feel, trying to adjust. I feel inspired by the anger I have over the whole thing to maybe write about it. But you tell me, what's on your mind? What's important? What's the news getting wrong? Email me at dan@wral.com.